Well, here I am again. I'm still listening to the Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan, and I just finished season 5, the South American Revolutions, or the South American Wars of Independence. And so, as is my custom, I'm turning on the camera to give my thoughts on it, ramble a little bit, talk about the experience of listening to it. Now, as I say at the beginning of all of these reviews, I don't really have anything intelligent to say about it. I mean, basically, my review is that it was pretty interesting. Some of the information, dense parts, I had a little bit trouble absorbing. But on the whole, I really learned a lot, and it was interesting, and I enjoyed it. And that's the review I think I give to every season, and that's basically my review here. And I'm just going to, well, I don't know. Spoiler alert. That's going to be the review. I'll talk about it a little bit, but I really don't have that much intelligent to say. I just, well, why am I making this video then? I don't know. Just because this is a habit I'm trying to get into about giving my thoughts on stuff as I listen to it. But consider yourself forewarned ahead of time that there probably is not going to be that much intelligent commentary in this review. Okay, that disclaimer out of the way. I guess maybe the best place to start is just talking about what I knew about the South American revolutions going into this podcast before I started listening to it. And the answer to that is almost nothing. So, yeah, there are some season 4, the Haitian Revolution, season 5, the South American Revolution, and season 9, which I haven't listened to yet, but which is coming up, the Mexican Revolution. All of these are things I know nothing about or knew nothing about before listening to the Revolutions podcast. The other revolutions I did know something about, but these were largely entirely new to me. So that has positives and negatives. As I said with the Haitian Revolution, the thing about this all being completely new to me is, boy, what a story, huh? There is a lot of fascinating stuff here in the story of Simon Bolivar and the South American revolutions. I had no idea what an epic story this was. But the negative parts is because this was all new to me. I did have trouble absorbing it, and I think if I had more background knowledge on this, read a couple books prior to it, I would have had some sort of framework within which to slot this information a little bit better. So yeah, my background going into this, I knew who Simon Bolivar was, and I knew who San Martin was, and that was about it. I think the entirety of my knowledge prior to listening to this comes from 7th grade. So in my 7th grade class, we were studying U.S. history, and we had a big, thick textbook on U.S. history, and they had a page on the South American revolutions, in which they mentioned Simon Bolivar and they mentioned San Martin, and they mentioned that Simon Bolivar liberated like the northern half of South America. San Martin liberated the southern half of South America. And you know, this was a 7th grade textbook, so it's oversimplifying stuff. And then at one point they had a meeting in the middle, and Simon Bolivar convinced San Martin to retire because Simon Bolivar wanted to be the sole liberator of South America. And my teacher made a big point of that. I don't remember what was in the actual textbook so much as I remember the teacher talking about it. And the teacher talking about how Simon Bolivar really did not want the competition from San Martin. He wanted to be the sole liberator of South America. And my teacher made a 7th grade history teacher, he made a point of contrasting that with George Washington and saying, what a difference between George Washington, who voluntarily stepped away from power, Simon Bolivar, who wanted to be the sole liberator of South America. Also contrasting it with George Washington's humility. Now, certainly after listening to Mike Duncan's version of it, I can see that that's a huge oversimplification and somewhat a distortion of what actually happened. And yet at the same time, after listening to Mike Duncan's version of it, I can kind of see where my seventh grade history teacher was characterizing it like that. So, that's it's one of those things. It's stuck in my memory all these years later, even though seventh grade was a long time ago now. I mean, I do have this theory that stuff I learned when I was younger sticks in my memory better than stuff I learned when I was older. Like I remember my seventh grade history class much better than like a history book I read when I was 30. So I think that's why that little tidbit has stuck in my mind all these years later, even though we did not spend a lot of time on it, and that was really all I knew. And all these years I've never really bothered to read up on South American history or South American wars of independence. I guess it didn't really interest me, even though I was interested in the age of revolution in Europe. The revolutions out in the peripheries weren't as much interest to me. But just based on what I had heard in seventh grade history, that Simon Bolivar did sound like a bit of a fascinating figure. Somebody who, by sheer force of will or force of personality, was able to liberate most of the South America, and his relationship with San Martin as well was something that I'd always stuck in my mind. It kind of intrigued me. So that was my background going into this. Now, as I've said in the previous seasons, the way I listened to these podcasts was the way I listened to all the other podcasts. I have them on as background, so I'm very rarely just sitting in a room listening to this podcast and giving it my full attention. I have it on while I'm getting dressed in the morning. I have it on while I'm getting ready for bed in the evening, and I have it on occasionally at work while I'm doing some sort of mindless task on the computer, like formatting a Word document or something like that. I used to listen to podcasts a lot more with just puttering around the house, but that is largely gone now since having kids. I don't have the time for one thing, and it's not quiet in the apartment for the other thing. It's just just kind of largely while I'm doing other work on the computer, I have the podcast on, and I go through the trouble of saying that because obviously, when you do that, there are times when you're not giving it your full attention and you're only catching bits and pieces maybe of the story. And to make up for that, as with all the other seasons, as a habit I've gotten into over the years with all audiobooks or podcasts, I listen to it 3 times over. So I listen to it all the way through, then I listen to it all the way through a second time, and then I listen to it all the way through a third time, which is one of the reasons why it's taking me so long to work through this Revolutions podcast. But it's a labor of love. I'm enjoying it. I don't know. I do find that by the time I get to the third listening, I am getting a little bit sick of it. And I come to the end of each season. I have been coming to the end of each season, somewhat relieved to be done with it and looking eager to get into the next season. So when I finished off the third listening of this of the South American Wars of Independence, which I just finished up this morning, it was like, okay, can't wait to get into season 6, the Revolutions of 1830. That's something I'm really looking forward to now. So I don't know. That's a bit of a flaw in my system, I guess. But I do feel like I do pick up more pieces each time. Like I understand a little bit better with each subsequent listening. So I think I'm going to keep listening to it 3 times over. But yeah, I mean, when I reviewed the Haitian Revolution, which was another revolution that I was like the South American Revolution, something I knew almost nothing about, virtually nothing about before listening to it. uh, I said, there was a lot of information here, and there were episodes that were information dense where I didn't absorb everything. And I caught some of it, and some of it is good enough for me. But yeah, I didn't absorb everything. I had actually, somebody left a comment on my review of the Haitian Revolution saying they gave up on it because they had trouble absorbing all the information. And yeah, I understand that completely. The only thing I would say, and maybe this is just a personal preference, but I would say, well, look, if you don't understand all of it, if you're not absorbing all of the information, you don't need to give up on it. You just accept the fact that you're not absorbing all the information. But it's a podcast. It's background noise. So it doesn't have the same time commitment as carving out an hour of your day to sit down and read a book or to make a serious study of it. And that's, yeah, I guess that would be my only comment or advice on that. Because it does sound like, based on the comments I got from my previous video, the review of the Haitian Revolution, and I'll link to all these in the description down below, that is not just me. Other people are having trouble absorbing all of Mike Duncan's information, given the cadence in which he delivers that information, and given the fact that some of his episodes can be quite information dense, and given that I think most of us use podcasts as background noise, background accompaniment, something on in the background. You know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that hampered me here is my complete lack of knowledge of geography. I really, I knew Chile was in the south and I knew Colombia was in the north, but a lot of these countries, I'm ashamed to say it, but I really didn't have a firm view of where they were. Like, I didn't really know where Peru was in relationship to Colombia, details like that. Some of that's on me. I could easily have solved that by looking up more maps as I listened to this podcast. So like I said, the podcast was background noise. In the background, I was doing other work, so it didn't always lend itself to stopping what I was doing and checking maps. But no. I take it back. That's an excuse. I was lazy. I could have looked at more maps. I did look at a map near the end of it and was like, okay. So that's where Peru is in relation to Colombia. And that's what Gran Colombia looked like. Gran Colombia, if you haven't listened to the podcast, is the Colombian state that Bolivar helped found before it split off into smaller states. Right. So I guess that's all comment on the state of how I absorbed this, or how much or how little of this I absorbed. But yeah, things that I found interesting about it. What a life that Simon Bolivar had, and I guess I kind of already knew this from 7th grade history, but it was impressed on me really while I was listening to that whole season, is how much the story of independence for at least the northern part of South America was tied up with Simon Bolivar's life. So, this wasn't like the French Revolution where it went through different stages and different personalities were associated with each different stage of the revolution, right? This is Simon Bolivar guiding it through the whole thing. Even when the First Republic of Venezuela collapses, and then the Second Republic of Venezuela collapses, and then the Third Republic of Venezuela, like it's still Simon Bolivar coming back, and then there are other people in the peripheries, I had trouble keeping track of who all the different characters were, like Sucre and Paz and Santander. I've got a rough idea who these were, but Paz was the centaur of the plains. Santander was the man of laws. Sucre was his protege. But yeah, a lot of these characters coming in and out of the narrative. Again, when you're listening to this as a podcast and we've got on as background noise, it's tough to keep track of maybe all these names. But yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, Simon Bolivar seems like a really admirable character, and it's obvious that Mike Duncan is sympathetic to him even at the end, when he's showing signs of becoming a tyrant. Mike Duncan is putting a positive spin on that he was just always kind of an idealist. And if you've listened to that season, you'll know Mike Duncan compares him to Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell as well is somebody that Mike Duncan puts a positive spin on. But according to Mike Duncan's take on Oliver Cromwell, Cromwell was somebody who was always trying to lay down power and give power over to a constitutional system, but was just frustrated that everybody else kept doing the constitutional system wrong. So he had to keep resuming power, even though he didn't want it. That being said, though, it did strike me. And, take my opinion with a grain of salt, because admittedly, I've already admitted I just kind of half absorbed this. But it did strike me that Simon Bolivar is the kind of young idealist who, while you admire him, he's a kind of a young idealist who's going to get a lot of other people killed. I mean, you wonder how many lives were lost in these wars of South American independence. And you wonder if it wouldn't have been better if Simon Bolivar had just said, well, maybe it's not so bad to be under Spain after all. I mean, sure, their government sure sucks, but live and let live. We don't need to have a whole war over this. Where all these wars of South American independence, were they, how necessary were they? I guess you could ask that question about any revolution, huh? But yeah, he was certainly an idealist, somebody who was committed to the cause first and foremost, before personal advancement. And yet, you wonder maybe if the world would be better off without some of these idealists who started all these wars. And the other thing, of course, is he was an idealist, but he had a huge ego, and that comes through very clearly. His rivalry with San Martin, which wasn't all that far off from what my 7th grade teacher had initially taught us, maybe. His fear of being eclipsed. I mean, it's another reminder that, and again, like I said when I started this Revolution series in my first video, and like I've been saying all along, I have a tendency to romanticize the revolutionists, the revolutionaries, the idealists. But yeah, something that's very clear as you're listening through to this series is that they are not selfless. They have huge egos, all of them. Robespierre, what was the name of the guy with the Haitian Revolution? I can't believe I'm blanking on his name now. The guy in the Haitian Revolution, sorry, brain fart. Simon Bolivar, they were all, they all wanted to serve a cause, but they all had huge egos. Maybe I'm a little bit more attuned to this than I was before, because I read a book on evolutionary psychology, which The Moral Animal by Robert Wright, a couple years ago, which I talked about on this channel. And it's just got me thinking about how having an ego is part of our evolutionary psychology. We want everyone to think how great we are, because it enhances our status in the tribe and increases our access to mates and resources and food and stuff like that, and the resources of the tribe. So we humans are just inbred to have egos. It's just part of our evolutionary makeup. And yeah, the all of these revolutionaries definitely seem to have these huge egos, which is, I guess, is how they get into one of the reasons they get into leadership positions in the first place. So yeah, I mean, Bolivar, but all of them. I mean, Miranda, the precursor as well, definitely seemed to have a huge ego. Uh, Really, any historical figure, right? The reason they get into our history books is they could have had enough of an ego to want to make a name for themselves. But the other thing I thought was fascinating is how intertwined these revolutions were. And I mean, I of course known that the South American revolutions were part of the Enlightenment thinking, or the Age of Revolutions, right? But I hadn't really realized how interconnected the history is, with Simon Bolivar being in France for Napoleon's coronation, or Miranda being in America and making friends with the American revolutionaries, or yeah, being in France during some of the parts of the French Revolution, um, and the whole part about the Haitian Revolution, and how Simon Bolivar spent time in Haiti and uh, got his conviction to free all the slaves from the Haitian Revolution. How interconnected all of these parts were. Uh, that was really interesting. The interconnectedness of the revolutions. Um, and then what was going on in Spain during that time was also interesting as well. Now, I had known that one of the reasons that the Spanish American Wars of Independence got going is because Napoleon had hamstrung the Spanish Empire when he invaded Spain. I knew that little factoid. I didn't know much else. But the politics of the Spanish court during this time, uh, and how that played into Napoleon's hands, I found that to be interesting. Um, and the other thing I found interesting about what was going back on in Europe during the time was the liberal revolt back in Spain. Now, in the 1820s. Now, again, this is something I knew a little bit about. I picked this up from Eric Hobsbawm's book, The Age of Revolution, which I've talked about on this channel, and I'll try and remember to leave a link in the review down below. But he talked about the revolutionary wave of the 1820s, which Mike Duncan kind of skips over, because he goes the next season after this is the revolutions of 1830. But Hobsbawm said there was a wave of revolutions in the 1820s, largely in the Mediterranean, which included Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy. And it includes the liberal revolution in Spain, which I think, yeah, what was that? The mutiny in Cadiz was the beginning of that. Mike Duncan talks about that, and one of the. Sorry, I'm just looking through. Which episode was that? Yeah, episode 517, a mutiny in Cadiz. And there was a liberal government for 3 years in Spain before it was put down by an invasion by France. France in that time under the restored Bourbons. Um, And Eric Hobsbawm says that the wave of revolutions in the 1820s fostered international support in the same way the Spanish Civil War did in the 1930s. And his main, I think he says that the main one was the revolution in Greece, which had like an international brigade fighting in Greece the same way the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s had a international brigade. But he also said that the Spanish Civil War in the 1820s also had international support for the liberals and an international brigade of sorts fighting for the liberals in the 1820s. Now, Mike Duncan doesn't talk about that at all, but he does, yeah. And I guess if I could change anything about this podcast series he does, I'm a little bit disappointed that the revolutions of 1820s kind of get skipped over more or less. But he does mention them. Mention the situation in Spain in several episodes. So beginning with 5.17, he talks about the mutiny in Cadiz and the liberal revolt in Spain. So the 1820s don't get skipped over completely here. And I think looking ahead to season 6, it looks like in one of the appendices, it talks about the Carbonari revolt in Italy, which also happened in the 1820s. So apparently that gets stuck onto the season 6. So I guess he doesn't completely pass over the wave of revolutions in the 1820s. But yeah, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, didn't I? Point being, the point I wanted to make. Disappointed that the Revolutions podcasts kind of skips over the 1820s, but was happy to note that the liberal revolution in Spain is kind of inserted into the story of the Spanish-American Wars of Independence. Not given a lot of focus, but it is in there. Yeah. What else to say about this? I really don't know if I have all that much else to say about this. I'm sure I'll think of 10 things to think about once I turn off the camera. But yeah. Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture. That's the guy in Haiti whose name I was blanking on. Yeah. It's disconcerting how quickly I forgot his name. When I was listening to season 4, the Haitian Revolution, his name was right on the tip of my tongues. But now it's only been a few months and already I forgot his name. But yeah, that's the other guy that's the guy in the Haitian Revolution whose name I blanked on earlier. Okay. Yeah. I'll just stop it here. I think I've largely said everything that's come to mind at the moment. And on to season 6 now, the Revolutions of 1830, which is something I kind of know a little bit about. So this one I'm looking forward to. And I'll see you when I finish that one.